Okay, we should be good now. Can everyone hear me? Awesome. Let's get rid of this. Alright, let's get started then. So, today we have planned is we're going to try to make some projectiles, and the idea is to... Okay, great. You guys can hear me and see me. Awesome. So yeah, the idea is we're going to try to really understand functions, and I guess the eventual goal is to get into classes and objects. And JavaScript is actually a functional programming language, so we are going to kind of use objects in this example, but mostly we're just going to try to get functions really down, and we'll also include some arrays and some for loops. For some of you guys this might be a little bit of a review, but I think it's important that we really get functions down before we get into classes and objects. So like I said, we're going to make projectiles, and I think the most common approach to making projectiles that most students do is they just have a variable, and let me show the grid. Also, let me know if you guys are having any trouble hearing me, or if there's some bad background noise or something freezes. Just let me know in the chat. Oh, and also, I'm Charlie, if you guys don't know me yet. Okay, so yeah, what I was saying was most students will just have an ellipse with a X and a Y position. And you guys don't have to code this yet. And then they'll just increase the X position, and then when it hits the border they just reset it to 0, like this. But the problem with this is it only uses one ellipse, and also, well, there's multiple problems. One is that it's only one ellipse. Two, you have to wait for it to get to the end of the screen before it comes back. And there's some other issues with it, especially when your projectile starts interacting with other things in your game. But so a better approach to do this is allowing your game to have an unlimited amount of projectiles, which we can do by storing a bunch of projectiles in an array, and then constantly iterating through that array and checking the properties of each projectile or each object that we have. So let's start by making a function for our projectile. Actually, well, first let's go over functions a little bit, just to understand how they work and what their purpose is. So the purpose is basically to have some type of purpose where that you can use throughout your code. Like if you find yourself doing something repeatedly, or you find yourself writing a lot of code repeatedly, a function's a good thing for you to use, because then you don't have to constantly type out that code over and over again. But so a good example of a function is actually just a rect or an ellipse or point. All of those are types of functions where we pass a few parameters. So we pass an x, a y and an x and y size, a width and height, and then our function rect, when we call it, passes these numbers in and then creates the rectangle that we see on our grid with those numbers. So I think what we should do is we should just make our own function, a very simple one. I had planned is just one where we can add. So we're going to type function and make sure that you guys are outside the scope of function setup and outside of function draw. And also, before we get into this, definitely let me know if I'm going too fast or if I should explain something over again, because once we get to our arrays and our for loops, it's really important that we know how the function is working. So we don't want to dive into that stuff until we really understand our functions. So let's just start by saying function, and then we're going to call it add, because the goal of this function is going to be just to add two numbers together, which I know is a little bit pointless because our JavaScript math library already has adding functionality, but this is just for the purpose of learning how functions work, and I think it's really easy to understand and visualize. So we're going to say add, and then we want to say a comma b in between our parentheses. And I'll get into what that means in a second. Then we're going to say return a plus b. So what we did here was we said we're making a function. We called this function add, and then in our parentheses we told the computer that when this function is called, so when we type add in function draw or anywhere, when we call it, it's going to expect us to give it two variables. And in JavaScript we don't have to define what type of variables those are. In other languages we would have to say like int a to tell the computer that we're going to use an integer or a number, or we would have to say char a to tell the computer that we're going to be passing a character. But JavaScript doesn't worry about, or allows us not to worry about data types, so we can just say that we're going to pass in two variables at some point in our code. And then we open up our scope, and then we say with those two variables that we pass, return to our function call a plus b, so those two numbers added together. And so let's try to actually visualize that. So all we have to do is type text, or we're just going to use text here. And then we'll call our function add parentheses, and now we have to give it two numbers, so let's do 2 and 5. And then let's pop this up somewhere on our screen. Give it some text size. And we got 7 because we passed 2 and 5. So what happened was we called add, which is right here, our function that we just created, and then we passed in 2 for A and 5 for B. And then we returned, so we called it, passed these two numbers, and then in our function A and B were added, and then it returned it to our function call, which is add. So that's why all we had to type here was add 2 comma 5, because all it did was this return statement right here returned it back to our function called add. We could try doing that with a variable too. So let's say var total equals 0, and then in our draw we'll say total equals add, and then let's choose some different numbers this time, 5 comma 5, and then we'll display our text. We'll display total, and so we should get 10, right? Because 5 plus 5 is 10. And then we'll put this under the 7, 300. And there we have it, we have 10. So what happened here was we made a variable called total equal to 0, but then in draw we said total equals our function add 5, 5. So same process as before. we called add down here, passed 5 for A and then 5 for B. Our function added A plus B, which is 5 plus 5, returned it to our function call down here, and set total equal to what was returned from our function call here. And then we just displayed that with text right here. Okay. So this is a very, very basic function. And our functions don't always have to return things either to our function calls. We could just say, make a function right here that just displays text every time we call it. So we could say smiley, we'll make a smiley face. And then we don't even have to pass anything. Or actually, how about let's pass an X and a Y so we can say where we want our smiley to be. So we'll say in between these parentheses X comma Y. And then, so right here we're basically just making our own text function, which is also redundant, but for the sake of learning functions, we're going to do it. So, and then we'll make a smiley face in our text and give it the X and the Y. But this, like I said, we don't have to return anything here because all we're doing is displaying text. So down in draw, we just call our function smiley, pass where we want it to be. I'll put mine at 450, 250, and there we have a smiley face. So what happened was we called smiley, passed 450, 250, so then it went up to our function smiley, 450, 250 were passed. We have text here, which created our smiley face, and then X and Y is what we passed down here, 450, 250. So then it just displayed it on our grid right here. Is that making sense? Do you guys have any questions before we talk a little bit about arrays? If there's no questions, you can just say ready. Is that a question, Jan, or are you saying yes, you're ready to move on? Alright, I think I'm going to move on, but I am going to comment this stuff out for now. I'll leave it up here in case you guys want to, in case you're still typing it, I want to save it. But like I said, these functions are kind of redundant, so it's unnecessary to save these since we already have a function for text. It's called text, and our math library can already add stuff together. Okay, cool, you guys are ready. So I'm also going to assume you guys know a little bit about arrays already. We also have some videos about arrays too. But I think most of us haven't stored anything besides numbers or characters or words inside arrays yet. So, and in this example we're going to be storing objects inside of our array. But I guess real quickly let's just go over an array. So what's cool about JavaScript is we can just say var my array equals an empty array. In a lot of other languages you have to actually define how big that array is going to be from the beginning when you first define it. but we don't have to do that in JavaScript, which is super handy and saves us a lot of trouble. And so there's a bunch of methods that we can use with our array, or actually let's do this in the function setup just so it's not constantly adding. So yeah, there's lots of methods we can do, like push and splice, pop, all that. So let's just push hi into our array, and I did that by saying, or just to catch up, we made a variable called myArray, set it equal to an empty array, which we can define by using the brackets, which is right under the curly bracket. It's the same key, just don't hold shift. So we have an empty array here, and then in function setup, in the scope of function setup, we pushed this string hi into our array. And then, so with our text, we can display a few features about our array, or characteristics. We can say the length of the array, which we're going to use a lot in this project. I'll put that at 300, and I'm actually going to leave this, or we'll put a new text size in. But yeah, so visualizing the length of our array is going to be very handy for the rest of this project. But then we can also display what's in our array. And I'll put that at 250, 400. Okay, cool. So what we said here, with this line of text right here, text myArray.length 250, 300 is showing how big our array is, how many elements we have in our array currently. And then this text right here is saying text myArray at the 0th index. So what element is at the 0th index? And remember, with arrays we count 0. The 0th position is the first position. So it's 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc. So the 0 position, at the 0th element of our array we have our string hi that we pushed. And that's 250, 400. So let's try pushing something else in. Let's push hello. And let's see how that changes. So now we have 2 elements in our array, which we're displaying with this text. And still at the 0th index we have hi. And that's because what push does is it pushes elements at the end of our array rather than at the beginning. And there's other methods that we can use on our arrays that would allow us to put things at the beginning of our array, but for now and for the sake of this project, we're going to just use push. So we're going to push things at the end of our array. So what do you think would happen if we change this 0 to 1? Or actually, let's just make a new text. Or actually, I'll wait for you guys to respond. What do you think would happen if I wrote text myArray 1 and then put it at 400? So what would happen if I uncommented this line of code, or if I changed the 0 to 1? Any guesses? I think while I wait for you guys to respond, I'm also going to get rid of this stuff up here. But if you guys want to keep it, you can just comment it out. Yep, nice yawn. That's correct. It would say hello. Because at the first index of our array, we have our second element, hello. That is correct. Good job, guys. So, another command that we're going to use is splice. So, I'm gonna get rid of. We'll do this in setup again. So we're going to say myArray.splice, and let's get rid of the element at the first index, so hello, and we're just going to get rid of 1. So the way splice works is the first parameter is where you want to take out of your array, and then the second element is how many elements you want to take out at that position. So we said at the first position we want to take out 1 element, and now we no longer have a hello because we spliced it out of our array, and we only have 1 element in our array for the same reason. And so those are the two methods we're going to use, push and splice, with our array when we start creating these projectiles. And I think I do want to just, I'm going to get rid of the splice here, and I'm going to add a few more elements, or a few more things to our array, and you guys can add whatever you want to this array, but I'll just add the alphabet. So I'll just copy these. So let's add like 3 more things. And we can get rid of this. So we have 5 elements, or we have 5 strings or characters in our array right now, in my array. And so what I want to do now is to display all these without having to type out text like what we had here. I don't want to have to type another 3 lines of text, because let's say I had an array of 100 things. Let's say this number right here was 100. It would be a waste of time to type out 100 lines of code displaying every single text and every single element. So instead we can use a for loop or while loop, but here we're going to do a for loop. So we do that by saying for var I, and let's actually do this in we should do this in setup, because remember, I'm doing a lot of these things in setup because draw is constantly running, kind of like for loop. So if we're just running a for loop over and over again, that could possibly crash our browser. And same thing if we're just pushing these in our for loop, it's just going to keep pushing elements in, and we don't want that. Not right now, at least. So var I equals 0, so we're saying our for loop's going to start at 0, and then I, we want it to be less than the length of our array, and remember we can call the length of our array right here. And this is also something that's not all languages have, is this length method that you can call on arrays, or at least with ease you can call it, because like I said before, in a lot of languages you have to define the size of your array at the very start. You can't have this dynamic array that can shift constantly. But anyways, so we want our I variable to start at 0, and our loop's going to stop at the length of the array, and then we can say I plus plus. And then let's display all of our elements. So we'll say my array, and then instead of putting 0 or 1 or a specific index, we're just going to put I. And then we'll say, this could get a little messy, but we'll say 0 plus froze. Okay, 0 plus I times 10. Hopefully that works. We'll try some other numbers if it doesn't. And we'll put it at 350. Okay, yeah, then we have they're all jumbled up right here, so let's do times 50. Cool. So now we're displaying all the elements in our array. Do 100, because I changed the text size to 50. I'll change it to 45, so we get some space in there. Okay, so we have hi, hello, A, B, C, and those are all our elements. Hi, hello, A, B, C. So what we did was we made a for loop that starts at 0, and then each time we add 1 to I, and it goes until the length of our array. So our first loop, we display myArray 0, and then the next loop we display myArray 1, which is hello, next 2, which is A, then 3, B, 4, C. And then we have our whole array right here. Okay, making sense? Does anyone have any questions, or should we get into our project now? I think we covered a basic function, arrays, and for loops, and that's pretty much everything we're gonna use to make our projectile. So if you're ready to go, just say ready. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. And I'm going to delete this step in the meantime. Alright, not getting much response, so I think we'll just get right into making the function for our projectile. So we're gonna approach this in kind of the same way that we would if we were to just make it. We're making, well, I think the eventual goal is I have like a cool little spaceship that I'll give you guys the code for if you want, or you can make your own spaceship, or you can make a character, or whatever you want. But the idea is to have, well, my final project will look like a spaceship that has projectiles. It could be like lasers, rockets. Yeah, the goal is to be able to apply this to a game eventually. For now, we're just making the projectiles. Yep. But if you have this tool, it won't be difficult to apply this to another game. And if we have some time, we could even try and put like an asteroid in or something. If you guys have ever used the Code Naturally arcade when it was available, I'm not sure if it's still available. There was a asteroid blaster game that one of our educators, Joey, made. And that's the spaceship that I'm going to be using for this project. But to answer your question, Noah, the goal is to give you a tool that you can use in your games. And this tool you can use in lots of games. I found that almost everyone eventually wants to create some type of game that uses projectiles, and if you know how to use them in like this, in the way that I'm about to teach you, then your game will be a lot more advanced, and it'll allow you to have a lot more functionality than if you were to just type all your code and draw. Okay, got it. Just requires a URL. Okay, so let's get started. I'm going to try to go a little bit fast so we have time to make our projectiles look cool rather than just have them go in a straight line. But so we're going to type function, and then we'll just call it projectile. And so our projectile, right now we're just going to give it an X and a Y. So we would want to pass an X and a Y. Just like when we made that text, we passed the X and the Y, and then with the text function we put our X in. So, and then here's what we didn't do with those other functions, but we're going to do now, is we have to say, when you define variables within a function, and this is the same with classes, which we'll get into the next class, but we have to say this dot x, rather than what you're probably used to is var, right? But here, because we're within the scope of our new function that we just created, we say this dot x, and we're going to set it equal to x. And then we're going to do the same thing for y, this dot y, keep doing a comma, this dot y equals y. And so now all we're saying is, when we call projectile from anywhere else in our code, whether it's setup or draw, and we pass those two numbers x and y, then we're going to set those numbers to this dot x, and we're going to set that y to this dot y that we pass. Okay, and then I think we're also going to want to have a speed. So let's say this dot speed equals, let's just add that now. So we'll say x comma y comma s, and s is going to stand for speed. So we'll say this dot speed equals s. Cool, so now we technically do have a projectile here. This is all we really need, but it doesn't have any movement. We can't display it right now, but here we do technically have all the properties that we need for this simple projectile. But like I said, we don't have movement or any way to display, so let's start with displaying it. So we can say this dot show, and we're making another function here basically, or we can think of it as a method that we can use on that projectile when we call it, kind of like when we said myArray dot push. We'll eventually say projectile dot show. So we say this dot show, open parentheses, and then open curly brackets. And now we're going to say what happens when we call that method for our projectile. And this is where we make what our projectile is going to look like. So I'm just going to do, I'll make a red circle for now. And you guys can customize this however you'd like. But okay, so and then in our ellipse we're gonna have its x position is gonna be what we defined up here. This dot x, this dot y, and then I'll just make it 25 by 25. And I think that's all I'm gonna use for the sake of time. But like I said, you guys can customize that however you want. So let's just let's create a background. I'm gonna make mine black, and then let's display our projectile. Or sorry, actually let's finish our function first. So we have our show, and now our projectile also is gonna need movement. So we just find its properties. It has an x position, it has a y position, and it's going to have a speed. And then we said, let's represent this projectile with a red ellipse that has the position this dot x and this dot y. So now let's give it movement. This dot move, we'll call it. Open parentheses, open curly brackets, and here we'll say I have a syntax error. Let's see all our curly. On line 11. Sorry guys. Oh, sorry. I completely forgot. We have to say that it's a function. So we say this dot show equals function. Thank you for catching that, by the way. And then we have to say the same thing for move. There we go. Now we're all fixed up. So yeah, we have to say that these variables are going to be methods that we use on our projectile object, our function. Okay, now, so back to move. This is where we're gonna say how our projectile moves. And the way I'm formatting my game is so that my character is here and then the projectiles go upwards. So to do that, I would say this dot y, so this dot y minus equals this dot speed. And minus equals is just the same as saying this dot y equals this dot y minus this dot speed. Okay, cool. And so this is a very basic projectile, and this is really all we need here. We have an x, a y, an x, a y, its speed, an ellipse that represents it on our canvas, and then how it moves. So this dot speed, we're subtracting whatever our speed is going to be from y, so we'll go upwards from its position on the y-axis. Okay, cool. So now we can get into actually displaying these on our canvas. So we're gonna create an array, and this array is what we're going to use to store all of our projectiles. Because like I said before, the whole point of this is to be able to have unlimited projectiles rather than being limited to just one or two that we create with variables. And if we were to do that all in draw. So we'll say var equals projectiles. Make sure you say projectiles rather than projectile, because we already defined a function named projectile. Var projectiles equals an empty array, just like we did before. So now we have this empty array called projectiles. So let's put something in that array. So we're going to use push, like we did before. Projectiles dot push, and this is a new word that you guys, or you might be familiar with it already, but this word new is what we use to create our objects. And so we're going to say push a new projectile, and for now let's just put it at, so yeah, something that moves basically, like when Mario shoots fire, yeah, a rocket or an arrow. Those are all forms of projectiles. I probably should have made that more clear at the beginning. Yep, a flying object. That's a perfect description. Okay, so we're creating a new projectile. Sorry, not new projectiles. New projectile. And then, so now we look down here at our function and see what we have to pass. We have to pass an x, a y, and a speed. So for now, let's just give those. Let's give those static numbers. We'll just say start it at 250, 500, and give it a speed of 5. And so now our projectile does exist. And let's actually do what we did before. Let's display this the let's display the length of a array. So projectiles dot length, and then 300, 150. Yeah, that's the power up, the fire flower. Text size 50, and then let's give it a stroke of white so we can see it on our black canvas. 255. Okay, cool. So there's our one projectile that we just pushed in and set up. Yeah, so now obviously our goal is to display that projectile, and that's why we created these methods here, so we can see them. We have our show and our move. So let's show it. Let's do projectiles 0 dot show, and then projectiles, or so, well, first we'll just do this so you can see it, and it's not moving, right? Because we haven't called move yet. Oh yeah, Mario's got all sorts of power-ups. He can get big, and maybe that's it. Big and shoot fire. Projectile 0 dot move. And now we have, oh, my canvas, my screen froze there. Let's run it again. Cool, so it's showing and it's moving. We have one projectile, but it's kind of useless right now because we only have one, and we have no way to spawn new ones yet. So now let's do that. Let's make it so we can just spawn. And for my game, I'm just going to use spacebar. So if key is down, 32. You guys can use whatever you want. Then let's just spawn a new projectile, which we can do exactly here. And I'll actually just copy this line of code, put it down here. Okay, cool. So now every time I hit spacebar, it's spawning more. I'm not going to do any more because I don't want to crash my computer. But the problem here is that we are only displaying, we're only showing and moving the projectile at the 0th index. So like we did before, to display all of our the hi, hello, ABC, we need to use a for loop. So we'll just make the exact same for loop. Oh, not anti, sorry. Var I equals 0. I is less than the length of our array, so projectiles dot length. I plus plus plus. And then we can copy paste this, or let's just cut it and paste it. And instead of 0 dot show, we'll do I. And now let's see if this works. Yep, now we're seeing all of our projectiles. Alright, I'm gonna wait a second because I went through that pretty quickly. Does anyone have any questions? Is everyone's code working? There we go. Who was able to get what I have right now? Unlimited projectiles. Also, if you guys are waiting with me, now would be a good time to customize those projectiles if you want to use a rectangle, a triangle, or an assortment of various shapes, then now would be a good time to do that. Okay. Also, we should go over some of the flaws of our current projectile creator. One of them, which is the biggest flaw, is that this number only goes up. It doesn't go down. The length of our array is only going up, and I think once we hit like 500 or something, we might find our browser might start struggling a bit. So that's the number one issue. Number two issue is we can just hold spacebar down. It just creates unlimited projectiles, and most games don't have that type of functionality. Also, I don't think that'd be very fun because that'd be a little bit overpowered or whatever. So we want to create some type of limiter that only allows us to shoot or use one projectile at a time. So I'm going to read this. Oh yeah, that's a great idea. You can have more than one projectile too. That's the whole point of these functions, right? Is to if we find ourselves using something frequently or a lot, then we can create some type of tool to use that functionality at our disposal whenever we want without having to write tons and tons of code. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and move on. Let's eliminate that first problem of the length of our array only going up. So we can do that just how we did with the other array using splice. So we can say if projectiles on yours, it says that projectiles is not a constructor. So let me comment this out. So I think that might be, I should have used different names. Yeah, right, I think that is the issue. So we have projectile, and then our array is called projectiles. So make sure you don't confuse those. And I'm just gonna, here, I'll highlight this. So you should have projectiles here when you're pushing, projectiles when you define the array, projectiles, plural, when you display the text. Okay, you got it? Cool. So with the for loop, all those in the for loop. So anytime we're using the array, it's projectiles, plural. And every time we're using the function, which should only be here, here, and here, when we're pushing. When we're creating a new object, then we just say projectile singular, no s. Okay, cool. So yeah, we're just gonna use splice down here. So if projectiles projectiles plural dot, and all we have to say is y, because up here we said that our projectile has this property of y. So if projectiles.y is less than 0, or let's do -50, so it's fully off of our screen. Then we just splice it. We say projectiles dot splice, and splice works just like put, or sorry, no, splice is position and then the amount you want. So we're gonna remove at the I position, and we're just gonna remove 1. Okay, and that should do it. Let's try 21, and they all go down. Once they leave the screen, we don't have any more bullets. And we can get rid of this here. Or actually, let's just move it off of our screen. So we'll just say, make that -250 or something. The reason we want this is because if we don't, or actually let's just see if we can comment it out and see if we get any problems. Oh, we're good. Okay, so we don't need this. Alright, so we eliminated problem number 1. Let's do problem number 2, which is that you can just hold this down. We don't want that. We just want one at a time. Or maybe you do want this, and in that case you can leave it. But I'm going to show you how to make it so we can only do one. And I'm just going to use this timer. And we could technically do this in, we could make like another function in our projectile to define that method. Like, so for example, this stuff in here, this if key is down, could all go in our projectile. But I think just to make things basic for now, let's just leave our projectile as is and put that spacebar functionality in draw. Okay, so let's create our timer. We'll set it equal to 1. And then in here, we'll just have our timer constantly going down. Timer minus equals 1 over 60. And I'm going to do 1 over 60 because our draw is going at, or our browser is going at 60 frames per second. So if we do 160, if we subtract 1 over 60 at 60 frames per second, that's just going to equal 1. So we just get 1 second. And then in our if key is down, we can say if key is down 32 and our timer is less than or equal to 0, then we can push a new projectile. And then we also want to set our timer back equal to 1. Okay, and then now you can only shoot 1 a second, even if you just hold your spacebar down. And if you want that to be faster, all you have to do is change this timer around, change these two numbers, or even make the timer go down faster, like 130. Now it's going a little faster. But yeah, that's up to you to decide. No, you're having an issue. You can't make them appear. Is your number going up? When you hold down spacebar, does the number go up? I'm just going to check how much time we have left today. Okay, we got 30 minutes. Awesome. Oh, okay, it does go up. So that's... then you probably have... the problem is in here. Only one appears when it starts. So I think what happened is you still have the... you're only displaying 0. So check out this for loop that I have right here highlighted. It should be exactly like this, and you should have eyes in between the brackets. So I'll keep this highlighted for you. Also, as far as functionality goes, we're pretty much done for this lesson. So if you guys have any suggestions of what we should do to add to this project, you can try and do that with the remaining 30 minutes. Obviously, I think we should add a character. Jan, you're having trouble making yours appear. Are you also... does your number right here display more than 1 when you hit spacebar? Is it adding to that? Because if that's the case, then I think you're at the same point as Noah. You gotta make sure you have this exactly how I have it. I know I went through this part a little bit quickly. We actually have a good amount of time left, so if anything else needs explaining, be happy to do that. your number's not going up. Okay. That could be an issue here with the keys down. So if you're at that point, don't worry about this timer yet, or that. You just want, if key is down 32, then push this new projectile. Cannot read property show of undefined. Okay, so there's a few reasons that could be happening. One is if you're trying to call this method on an array that has nothing in it. Yeah, change that. So you have projectiles square bracket 0. Change that 0 to I. No, did you start getting the error when we deleted the line of code that was in function setup? Okay, we got a lot of errors going on. Let's just go down each line of code, okay? So we have var projectiles equals empty array. Alright, everyone join me in going over all the code we have so far. Okay, so var projectiles equals empty array, and projectiles with an S, because it's representing all of our projectiles. Then we have function projectile, singular, no S, passing x, y, s, and then we have this dot x equals x, this dot y equals y, this dot speed equals s, and then we say this dot show equals function, parentheses, then curly brackets, and then we filled it red, and we create this ellipse with position this dot x, this dot y, 25 by 25. Then close the curly brackets, and then we did this dot move, and this is all still within our projectile. See, we have our opening curly bracket and our closing curly bracket. So we say this dot move equals function, parentheses, curly brackets, and then we say this dot y minus equals this dot speed. So instead of focusing on that error, everyone just go over every line of code with me. Because I think the issue is probably, which is my mistake, is this plural projectiles and this singular projectile. Okay, we don't have to worry about the timer yet, but I do have a var timer equals 1, and this is outside of the scope of projectile. See right here. I'll make that more clear. And then we have our function draw. I have a background, a stroke, text size, displaying the projectiles. Okay, awesome. Don't worry about the timer yet, but if you want to, timer minus equals 1 over 30. And then here's where I think we're having all the issues. For var I equals 0, I is less than projectiles dot length, I plus plus, and then we say projectiles, and this is key right here, I, in between the brackets, dot show, parentheses, same thing here, projectiles I, dot move, then if projectiles I dot y is less than -50, then projectiles dot splice I again, comma 1. And this if statement is inside the scope of this for loop. See, look, our for loop encompasses all of this. So we have an opening, and then it closes here after the if statement. And then we have this keys down if statement. If key is down 32, and timer is less than or equal to 0, projectiles dot push new projectile, and then the parameters timer equals 1. And then here's the end of draw. You found it, Robert? Awesome. What was the issue? I'm going to take a look at some of that code. Okay, Robert, if yours is working now, then you can use this time to start working on some type of a character or a ship or something where that will represent the actual source of these projectiles. So once everyone else has their code working, then we'll make like some type of ship down here that follows our mouse X, or you can use key interactions to move. Yon, how are you doing? Did you find your error? I got your email, Mackenzie. I'll check it out. Okay, I'm taking a look at your code, Noah. Cool, your function looks good. And you have your array. Oh, okay, so I'm gonna bring yours over here, Noah. So check it out. Right here, you have an extra 2 lines of code. We don't need these 2. You do that perfectly right here, which I also have right here. But I should have made it more clear that when we moved it, this code right over down to here, we are also getting rid of this. So right under your text, projectiles.length, just delete these 2 lines of code. And I think that should fix it. Everything else looks super good. Let me know if you got that now. Okay, you're sharing your project too, Jan? Awesome. The projectiles don't move. Okay, let's see. I'm gonna make a new project with your code and it, and then let's see if we can get it working together. Okay. So here is what you have. Oh, right. So check it out right here. You need one more parameter. You gotta give it a speed. So we can put 5 or something like that. And there we go. Now you have it. I like your color scheme too. Yeah, you're right. You do have a speed right here, which you defined. But then right here, when you push them, you forgot this last number right here, the last parameter. So you don't have to put 5. You can put any number. But that's how our function is going to know what we need to add right here, or subtract. Tell me when you got that. Yep, line 39. Got it? Awesome. Alright, I'll go back to mine now. How's everyone else doing? Yeah, it's definitely easy to miss those small things. We have a lot going on. I think it's important to always check this projectile. You got it, awesome. Did you send your code, Jan? I'm not actually completely sure how they're sharing them. I believe we just I think just here there's this link right here in the description, and you can click on that start, enter your name, and fill out the prompt, and then submit it there. Let's see. I'll try that. Let me know if I'm doing this right, Mackenzie. I'll just leave this blank. Okay, I guess I'm doing this wrong. Okay, exit. Oh, got it. So these three buttons here. And then share. Okay, sorry guys. Generate link, and then you can copy the link there. Cool. Yeah, it's definitely changed. That's a cool feature though. I wasn't aware of that. Robert, are you able to get your game working? Yeah, if you guys have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Also, since we didn't have the time to make any type of character, I think we should talk about how we could apply this to a game we currently have. So, let's say we had a side scroller and we had like a Mario type character, and we wanted to create those fireballs that he throws when he gets the flower. Then all we would have to change is, instead of our this dot y, we would change x, right? Because his fireballs move to the right. Also, I think they also bounce too, so we could add some gravity type features. But for a very basic one, we would just change this y to x, and instead of subtracting, we would add. Also, right here, when we create new projectiles, instead of starting them at 250, 500, we would just start them at the variables of our Mario. So let's say we had a Mario X and a Mario Y. Wherever the position of Mario is where those projectiles will start. Okay, I'll look at your code young. And then maybe we'll have time to add in a character. I think we should. Okay. So I'm gonna pull up your code young so we can compare it. We have prot for your array. XYS good. This is good. This is good. Okay, we have some curly bracket issues here. So check it out. You open it, and then it closes here, but we want it to close right here. So you're going to want to close it on line 16. So just move this one to line 16. And then if we go down here, let's see if this is good. Show, move, those are good. Length, good. Push, that's good. Oh yeah, and then this should be less than. Oops. Yeah, this should be less. Your two fixes are, this should be less than. So swap this around, and then move this curly bracket to right here. Nice, I see you did that already. Great work. Once you get that, let me know if it's working. Yeah. So also for next week, guys, I think we could, if it's the same group of people, we could finish this up. I wanted it to eventually look like this. And then we can maybe try to implement some type of asteroid that comes falling from the sky. But then I wanted to get into classes and objects. And so for the video I just made, or that Mackenzie and I just made for the YouTube, we introduced classes and objects with rain. I think that's a cool idea. Also, or any type of particle system. I thought maybe bubbles could be a cool idea. A while ago I made bubbles for this looker animation. We could make, and this is using a particle system, so we can make bubbles like that. But yeah, let me know. Could you use the same concept projectiles for making enemies? Yeah, totally. Oh, okay, yeah, we'll be publishing that video soon. But yeah, I think particle systems are super awesome and fun to make, and they're a great use of objects. And it's also a cool way to analyze the world around us, nature, and try to dissect the properties that certain things in nature have and try and simulate them with code, which is kind of what P5 was created for. Yours is still not working. Okay, let's see. Okay, this is, you fixed that, that's good. Nice. I think I'm going to do the same thing that I did with nose, and we'll copy it into a new project. Try and fix that bug together. Okay, so for some reason we have 3. right at the start. Text. Oh, prot.length. There you go. Your error's right here. Super simple fix. Just change that pro to prot, which is your array. And then you should get your projectiles. Did that fix it? Yeah. Okay, we're good. Huh. For some reason, you can't do any more. After they splice. Oh, it's working now. For some reason, when it gets back down to 0, you're unable to spawn anymore. That could be the timer problem. Try adjusting the timer. There we go. Cool. Okay, yeah, so just swap that around and then we're good. Okay, and I think everyone's code is good now. Got 3 minutes. So yeah, I think we should finish this project up for the next class, maybe in the first 10 or 20 minutes of class, and then kind of go over how we could apply this to a game that we might already have, or a new idea for a game, and then we'll try and get into using classes and stuff, classes and objects. Yeah, if anyone has any questions in these last few minutes, now would be a good time to ask, or any suggestions. If my game plan sounds good, just let me know. Yeah, we could definitely eventually do Minesweeper. Yeah, that sounds like fun. I would definitely prefer to do Minesweeper on a live stream rather than a video, because it would just be kind of a complex game, and that would probably be a multi-part live stream, but I'd definitely be happy to do that. Thanks for the suggestion, Robert. Alright. We're almost at 4 now. Oh yeah, we're at 4 now, so I'm gonna close up the stream, but I'll stay in the chat for a little bit if you guys have any more questions. But yeah, thanks for sticking through till the end. Yeah, we could do that for our class. I would prefer to do it that way, definitely. Or if you mean using classes, I would also prefer to do it that way as well. But yeah, so I will see you guys next week, hopefully, and post any questions you have in the chat, and I'll try and get to them. Thanks, guys. See ya.